I've got to dish it out nice and thick, apparently. Crumbs, that sounds terrifying. I'll try and get this over as quickly as possible. I think you're probably desperate for lunch. But let me find the little clicky thing, that will help. So I want to talk to you today about creativity in the age of the machines. We're definitely in an era where machines are starting to invade our lives and control us more and more. To kick it off, I'm going to give you a literature lecture, though. I'm really sorry about that. This word here, timshel, very interesting word. It's a Hebrew word that comes from the Bible, and it means thou mayest. But unfortunately, for about 400 years, Christians have been getting it wrong because the translation was wrong in the King James Bible. Timshel has been translated as thou shalt. But actually, it means thou mayest. We have human agency, we have free will, we can be who we want to be on any given day. Our industry, unfortunately, despite being a creative industry, suffers from that mistranslation quite a lot. There's a lot of thou shalts in marketing and advertising. There's a lot of holy cows, there's a lot of beliefs that are frankly wrong. And I think if we want to get it right and produce better work and work that means something to people, not just to consumers, I think we have to rethink that, and we have to understand where we are at the moment and understand the power structures in which we operate and understand how technology affects our lives. So I want to talk about that today. So technology affects our lives a lot. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs redrawn for the internet age, but actually this is the right one. So I don't know if your phones are fully charged at the moment, but you can't get anything done if they're not. You literally just power down. We're almost becoming cyborgs. The phone is part of us. Artificial intelligence augments who we are. I think that means that we need to think a little bit about how we use technology and where we fit in this space. Too many people stand on stages like this talking about how empowering digital technology is. But is there anybody in this room who checks their social media last thing at night, first thing in the morning, 95 times in the time in between? Is there anybody in this room whose email is their to-do list? You know, when you wake up in the morning and go to work, whoever's most recently emailed you, the most loud and vociferous of project managers, basically decides for you what you do. The technology controls you. Now, of course, technology can be empowering as well. But when we're very heavily steeped in it, as in the very developed markets like the US, Europe, the UK, it starts to control us. We need to think about that a little bit when we design for this space. I also don't, I'm fond of saying this, but I really, that image looks shitty, sorry about that. Another thing you hear at conferences like this all the time is that the consumer is now in control, as if some mythical control has shifted from marketing directors telling everybody what to do before the internet to now consumers wanting to manage brands on behalf of our clients. It's bollocks. The consumer's not in control of her credit card balance or her calorie intake, let alone your brand. So let's perhaps reclaim a little bit of our agency as creatives and as marketers and think a little bit about maybe controlling the messages ourselves, or even, God forbid, creating entertainment or something useful. Social media has helped to put us in a position now where our attention is atomized, right? We're floating across the top of culture all day long on Facebook, looking at BuzzFeed's 8 reasons why you look like a washing machine or whatever it might be. And it distracts us from thinking clearly and deeply about issues. You know, we're completely fractured. It's wonderful that the internet appeals to all kinds of niches, people doing weird things with shoes, or I found a bulletin board the other day dedicated to people who get off on chewing ice. You know, it's very interesting, it's fun, but it atomizes and fractures our attention. It makes it very hard for people to concentrate and do anything. There's a huge amount of well-meaning intent in the social space, but precious few people doing anything about it. If you think back to the Green Revolution in Iran, when everyone changed their Twitter profiles to a green color to show solidarity with the people of Iran, but nobody came up with an alternative to the theocratic state, and so nothing changed. And this is a classic problem. Now, I really think that there is something that brands can do about this, and I'll get onto that in a minute. But while I'm having a pop at the internet, I think there is this challenge at the moment. The amount of attention that we've got because of the proliferation of pages and content and inbound is going down, and the amount of media goes up. And I think that has a downward pressure on quality. And I will also be reasonably controversial given the industry that we're all in. I think that the ad-funded model of internet content is fundamentally wrong and broken. If people want free content online, it has to get paid for somehow, and currently that model is by advertising, and the dominant model is by page views. And that means there's a massive incentive for online news sources and websites to publish things that maximize page clicks, which is why you get so many shitty slideshows on websites where you just click through, and all this link bait phenomenon that you see. If you're interested in this, and you don't want to take my word for it, read this book, Trust Me, I'm Lying, by Ryan Halliday. He's a man who used to be the marketing director for American Apparel, a job he got when he was about 23. Which is slightly annoying. It's full of examples of how the media is manipulated through digital content. So an example of a piece in Jezebel about exploding nail varnish in American Apparel stores. There was a product recall because they had some problems with cracks in the bottles, but that became a front page story in newspapers and all over the TV news because a blogger had basically misreported it as some kind of, terrifying exploding nail polish issue. There was a spurious complaint from a disaffected employee on The Daily Show that led to her accusing that program of having a women problem, of being sexist. That became CNN News and the front page of the New York Times because a blogger had misreported it. We take misreported information on blogs and we blow it up and it becomes headline news. Ryan Holiday knows about it very well because that's exactly how he used to run his marketing campaigns. It's a very interesting book that will help you understand. So I think that the model of the internet is potentially, the content model is potentially broken. And we have this other problem. I found this really terrible GIF that I thought I'd share with you this morning. We have this other problem of the software of the internet is forcing us to operate and to think in certain kinds of ways. So if you think about MIDI, like electronic dance music's fantastic. I was lucky enough to be part of the original rave generation where electronic dance music came to the fore. 25 years later, it still sounds the same. That would be like me going out to a club in 1990 and listening to Elvis Presley. And the reason why it sounds the same is because it's created with a software platform based on MIDI, which is really good if you're a keyboardist. It's based on keyboards, but it's not very good if you want to create guitar sounds or violin sounds, long, stretchy sounds. So music is becoming replicated in a very locked-in way. And I think it's true of the way in which a lot of the software that we engage with, the operating system of the internet that we engage with, it's forcing us to be creative in a very limited palette. And I think that's a challenge. We need to think about that. We need to react against it. It's not to say that the internet isn't a space for creativity. Of course it is. There's massive creativity going on. But we need to understand the limitations of it so that we can transcend them in some way. I think another challenge that we're dealing with at the moment is the way in which technologists revel in the removal of cultural gatekeepers. If you think about the Kindle platform on Amazon, what Jeff Bezos is effectively saying there is that we don't need editors. We don't need cultural gatekeepers to decide which books we read. I think that's great if you want to read 50 Shades of Grey, where, frankly, the writing is worse than the sex. And millions of people wanted to read that book. Great, but it's a popularity contest. It's not about good literature. We need people to fund unpopular things in order for culture to move forward, because the mainstream takes its energy from the underground. And that's a challenge when everything becomes a popularity contest. Everything becomes like X Factor. How many people like it, and then that decides where it goes. So we need to think about that, and we need to recognize that sometimes you need the people that have done the reading. It's a very unfashionable, slightly elitist point of view in a way. But you need people who understand the context of culture to move it forward. I would argue again, if you have a brand that is grounded in some sort of purpose, and you know who the people are that you're addressing, as a brand, you can play a role as a cultural gatekeeper. You don't need to copy digital culture as you see it in social media. You can define it. You can help to affect behavior in the long run. Because there's a lot of really silly stuff online, right? This thing was done by Dentsu. I always have a pop at this, but it really upsets me. It's had 3.5 million views on YouTube, and loads of people think it's absolutely fantastic. It scans your brain, and it tells the person looking at you if you're happy or sad. And people, I saw them present this at Spikes in Asia, and they with a straight face said that this could solve the language barrier globally. Doesn't smiling or looking sad do the same fucking thing? So as technologists, we have this, we get fascinated by the technology and what it can do, and we forget to think about whether this is a problem that needs solving in the first place. The human condition is not a bug to be fixed. So, and this is another thing that I think is remarkable as well. I don't know how many of you have bought one of these. I feel sorry for you if you have. Who needs their text messages on their wrist? Do we really need that? Does that really add anything? Have we really got to the point as human beings where you need something on your wrist to tell you when it's time to stand up? It drives me nuts. There's a water bottle you can get at the moment that tells you how much you've drunk. Can't you just look at the bottle and see how, So we're starting to create interventions in our lives that seed power from a self-directed individual with thoughts and loves and interests who's done a bit of reading, and seeds that power to a sort of aggregate of everybody else's behavior. This is not a good way to move culture forward. So as creative people, and as commissioners of creative work, and speaking to clients there, we need to think about that a little bit and reclaim agency. We did a big study at DigitasLBi in the UK recently, which we're going to roll out globally, on the impact of social media on young people, on their levels of depression and how they're feeling and all sorts of stuff. One of the things that we found out in there is that a vast majority of young people get their cues for their behavior, particularly in the digital space, from the brands that they follow. Which is interesting because most of the brands that I spend time talking to are desperate to find out what the kids are doing, and they're copying them. So the kids are copying the brands, and the brands are copying the kids, and nobody's showing any leadership. So I think there is a massive opportunity here, again, for brands to claim back a little bit of that power as cultural creators, and to stop sort of watching what the mass is sort of doing in the digital space, and actually start to define and lead that behavior. So I think brands can do that by being morally and socially purposeful, and we've seen some great work in the festival this year that does that, and I think there's a lot of good work happening on the continent in general that does that. Brands can be tastemakers rather than followers. They can create high-quality experiences, and they can be useful and entertaining. They can lead culture instead of following culture. Now, in order to do that, they have to give up on this idea that people are interested in the sort of USPs of their products and in lots of detail on a product level, and really mean something as a brand and have a role in people's lives that's active and powerful. So I think if they're going to do that, creativity can no longer be morally neutral. I think as an advertising industry, we've historically had this idea that we're whatever you want us to be, baby. So on the one hand, you can work for BAE Systems, who are putting landmines in the ground, and on the other hand, you can work for UNICEF, and there doesn't seem to be any conflict of interest there. As an industry, we have to change that. I think big marketers like Unilever, for example, are leading the way, and in fact, the clients are leading us on this. So I would call for anybody who has any decision-making power in their agency to think about that and try and take a moral stance on who you will work for. So we can't be this anymore. This is just an excuse to show some favorite clips.
Rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Most people probably don't listen to the lyrics, but they should, because it's not just about the pleasures of conformity and the importance of trends, it's also a personal statement about the band itself. Hey, Paul! Ah!
So that's really got nothing to do with this, but I just thought I'd show it to you. It's just a little montage of evil. So moving on from a montage of evil to purpose, this picture is of some kids in Ethiopia who lived in an extremely rural area. MIT did a project in 2012 where they took tablet computers into this village. They put a generator in there, presumably, so they could charge them up, otherwise the experiment wouldn't have lasted very long. But anyway, they thought that the kids would play with the boxes that the tablets came in. Within 5 minutes, they'd open up the boxes and turned them on. They'd never seen an on-off switch before. Within 4 days, they were using an average of 47 apps per child per day. And within 5 days, they were singing ABC songs in English in the village. And within a few months, they'd hacked Android. So somebody, apparently, some genius had disabled the camera on these things, perhaps thinking that these kids wouldn't be interested in it, and they figured out how to hack Android. And this was all without an internet connection. So when Facebook's internet.org initiative takes off across Africa, and you've got 11,000 drones at 65,000 feet beaming Wi-Fi into these areas, there is huge potential for lifting people out of poverty. And technology is fantastic at doing that. It's very, very good at lifting people out of extreme poverty and giving them opportunity. it's when you get into the developed market situation where technology has a slightly more complicated impact, in that what it tends to do is make industries efficient and remove middle-class jobs from industries, and you get the rich and the poor. Let's hope that doesn't happen on the continent here as technology starts to get more embedded. And I think if we think about the power structures here and we're aware of them, we can do something about that. So I'll give you an example of some work from Unilever.
A recent study found that SA has the lowest maths literacy rankings in the world. With 86% mobile penetration and our OMO Fast Kids program, this is a stat we have the power to change. OMO Fast Kids is an interactive online learning platform for mobile phones, tablet devices, and desktop browsers. 7-year-olds through to 18-year-olds with access to a device are able to sharpen their skills and get exposure to the foundations of mathematics through a gamified learning experience. But how do we make maths more appealing than mobile games or Facebook browsing? Using an age-old technique, tangible and tasty rewards. As budding boffins practice Pythagoras and the likes, virtual tokens are earned and can be used to gain incentives like Paddle Pop ice creams and Hungry Lion vouchers, courtesy of Unilever. We've had up to a 30% redemption rate on these rewards. Recognition is another driving factor. A leaderboard gives the young...
So, that's an example from Loeries, which is part of our network here in Africa. I think what's interesting about that and other campaigns like it is that it's seeking to build the middle class of the future in Africa. You know, brands need to take some thought about that. They need to think about that, how they're going to grow the future customers. Because if there isn't a middle class there to buy the products, the brands won't be there. And I think increasingly we will see work with social purpose that makes strong business sense as well, which I think is interesting. Another example from my own agency is American Express Small Business Saturday, which is a big campaign in the US that started life in 2009. And eventually it's become an official day as defined by Congress in the US calendar. It was tweeted about by Obama, which is impressive for a marketing campaign. What it effectively did was get people to go and spend a small amount of money, $20, in local stores. It was such a big initiative in the end, so much mobilization again through social media that it's been credited with kickstarting the American economy at the end of the Great Recession. The reason, it's quite a famous campaign, so I won't bang on about it any more than that, but one of the point I wanted to make is that it took 5 years for this to work. And again, if brands want to be part of culture and they want to be part of people's lives, they have to commit to these initiatives. It's no good doing something for a year or two, and then when the marketing director disappears or somebody else comes in, they move on. That's not good enough. If you want to be part of people's lives, you have to commit. You have to be there for the long run. This was a commercial failure for 2 years. Then it started to look good, and after 5 years, it was absolutely fantastic. It won a Black Lion in Cannes for effectiveness. So it's interesting. And again, in order to play in this space, and in order to transcend some of the limitations of digital technology that I was talking about earlier, brands have to ditch business as usual. I'll just show you a quick video from AstraZeneca, which won the Grand Prix in the health category in Cannes this year, and it doesn't look anything like health advertising usually looks. And it's a bit ambient at the moment. Hopefully.
Face it, we all love tasty food and cold beer. But when that love gets out of control, it takes a true friend to snap you out of it. Meet Marty and Sal, a couple of spokesfish with big ambitions.
Scorsese called me.
Is that right?
Yep. Wants me to be in his next film.
When's that filming?
In 6 months.
Yeah, don't think you're gonna be available.
But their biggest ambition, helping AstraZeneca tell the world about lowering triglycerides, something two heart-healthy fish know a lot about.
Triglyceride? Triglyceride.
Who are you talking to?
Marty and Sal were talking to men with a history of unhealthy habits. So for them, we created an integrated campaign designed to educate and change behavior. Through our Take It From a Fish site, people could learn more about lowering their triglycerides with videos, eating, and exercise tips.
Did you know a healthy diet with less sugar can be a great way to help lower them?
Yeah, I told you that.
But guys who love beer and hot dogs don't always listen. So we reached out to their loved ones for added support. We targeted their wives on Pinterest with recipes and eye-opening health tips designed to put their husbands on the right track.
That's a good woman right there.
She seems a little naggy to me.
For their grown-up kids, we started healthy eating conversations on Twitter.
You ever been in love, Sal?
We're not that close.
And the best part is, it worked. We became one of the top 5 brand Twitter health campaigns ever. YouTube completion rates were 100% above the category average. In the end, we gave some unhealthy guys some useful information and encouraged them to change some of their old lifestyle habits.
If they're committed to eating healthier, then I'd be willing to sacrifice myself for their greater good.
Very big of you, Marty.
After all, isn't that what friendship is all about?
Not good.
Nope, not at all.
So I think what the jury liked about this at Cannes is that on the one hand, it's doing the things that traditional advertising has always been good at. It's character-based, it's fun. But rather than trying to sell a pill to people, they're just trying to make people healthier. They're using some entertainment to do that. There was some service design components. There was a strong use of social media. But ultimately, this is a brand thinking long-term about how to improve health outcomes for people, rather than focusing short-term on how they can shift the pills as quickly as possible. So I think that's an interesting paradigm for how brands might reclaim a bit of agency and put work out there that's a little stronger. I also think it's worth being counterintuitive. I think there's too much in the social media space, there's too much of a rush sometimes to try the next platform or to go all out in social. This is an example from Taco Bell, which kind of does the opposite. And the videos are running a little slow, I apologize for that, but should be all right.
To launch Taco Bell's new mobile ordering app, we had to be louder and more disruptive than anyone else. With 1.6 million apps already in the App Store, we knew we had to go uber big on all Taco Bell's social channels.
Or we could shut them all down. And launch their new app by making it the only place fans could engage with Taco Bell. A full-scale blackout across every social channel, making the message clear. The new way to Taco Bell was only in the app.
According to the news reports, you blacked out on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and so forth. How long's your blackout going to be? What's the thinking behind it? Aren't those big advertisers for this?
By blacking out all our social media areas, the people that are our biggest fans will now be the first to know that we have the app.
No, Taco Bell hasn't been hacked or given up on social media.
So you have to know your audience. I mean, it really was a genius marketing plan.
We said nothing, and everyone started talking. We left Twitter and trended on Twitter. And with over 300,000 installs in just the first 2 days, we outranked the most popular apps in America, including these guys, and proved that to earn the biggest spotlight, sometimes you have to go dark.
So I think that's a bold piece of work there. Thinking back to Tim Shell, thou mayest rather than thou shalt. People in our industry think that thou shalt give all the control to the consumer, that thou shalt not force them to do something. In this case, because it was done in the right way and with a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, we did force people into a different kind of behavior. We regained control of the process a little bit there. So I think brands can be the lightning rod. When everybody's fractured and confused and on BuzzFeed all day long, there is an opportunity for brands to be a place that can galvanize attention, whether that's around social purpose or just through doing a kind of cheeky stunt like the Taco Bell example there. So I'm going to leave you with two potential thoughts for what the future of marketing might be or what our jobs might be. Either our job is to get people to buy stuff they don't need with money they haven't got to make themselves feel better about the fact that they work all the time and aren't famous yet, which is a bit depressing. Or it could be to add value, richness, purpose and fun to products and services so that economic dignity grows and we all get a little bit happier, and I hope it's the latter. Thank you very much indeed.